it is my pleasure to welcome to the truth today Mel K. She is an author, opinion leader, podcaster. She is a wonderful American treasure, and we are honored to have her on the truth today. Mel K., welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, sir. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, thank you. And you can drop that sir stuff. I'm already feeling a little sensitive about my age. And here we are. We're just starting the interview, and you're calling me sir. Okay. Well, you've written a book called Americans Anonymous: Restoring Power to the People, One Citizen at a Time. I got an
Yep.
advanced snippet, but no advanced copy. Thank you very much. But tell us about the book and how do we get it? And I love the title, by the way. I think it says it all.
Thank you. Well, I've been traveling the country pretty much for the last 3 years nonstop, speaking to all different kinds of groups, big and small, mostly liberty and freedom-oriented groups, certainly that took an extension after COVID to kind of look at really what happened during COVID and the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and why we have to make sure that we understand all of our history and what actually is legal and illegal and what our government can and cannot do so that nothing like that ever happens again. And in my travels, I've met thousands of people. I do a lot of meet and greets, and all I could see was something that was reminding me of, I don't know if you're familiar with the Yuri Bezmenov interviews with G. Edward Griffin from the 80s, but he was a defector from Russia who came here and talked about how the communists were going to infiltrate America in a four-step process. And he talked about demoralization, dehumanization, normalization, crisis, and kind of laid it out. And all I kept thinking was, it didn't matter what side of the aisle people fell on. It didn't matter what, race, religion, nationality. It just seemed that everyone felt like demoralized by what America had become and was becoming. And if you pulled out the politics, what you saw was people that were overwhelmed, were in a state of learned helplessness and felt that basically their voice and their vote didn't really matter. So why participate? And I got this all the time. And about 20 years ago in Hollywood, I went to, I was lucky enough to end up in a recovery program myself. And I saw the parallels to this. I felt that life had become unmanageable in America. Our whole situation seemed like we had hit rock bottom. And I kind of saw the analogy, and I also saw the solution in my mind, which was what I had experienced when I was younger is, when you're feeling that way in life and you feel hopeless, somebody might give you a hand up and say, come to this meeting with me and, maybe it'll help. And I remember walking into a meeting very young in LA, and you have to walk in humbly. You have walked in because there's a problem, and you are the problem. You're seeking help and guidance and solutions, and a return to, in my case, in most cases, God and fellowship with other human beings and being open. And I thought, wow. America needs an intervention, and we should probably start having meetings where people leave their R&D and L outside, come in humbly, and want to be part of the solution and are willing to give God and their fellow humans a shot at being a fellowship leading us back towards the goal of the country, which is to form a more perfect union. So I came up with the concept. I worked it into a lot of our history. I cover in there a lot of what happened during the times of the Federalist Papers, through the Declaration of Independence, through the Constitution, Bill of Rights. And I also identify what I believe to be the addiction that we have all been through social media, real media, Hollywood, and the politicians, is we are in a state of being addicted to conflict and chaos that is being hoisted upon us, I believe, by what I call and I define as pushers, dealers, and suppliers. And I kind of lay out who I believe they are, what they're doing, and how until we realize that we're actually all on the same side, and that the illusion that there's a right and left, or Republican and Democrat at this point in the United States is false. And really, we have to decide the destiny of our country one citizen at a time. And that means going back to what we were warned about in the beginning, that we have a constitutional republic, if we can keep it, meaning that every
In the
citizen of the
words
United
of
States should
Benjamin
take it upon
Franklin.
themselves to have a stake in what is happening in this country and be vigilant and invested and involved locally. So I go through the whole thing, and then the end is a bunch of solutions. And in the appendix, I put the entire Declaration of Independence, Constitution, and Bill of Rights, because frankly, I don't think most people have ever read it, let alone read it now. And it's really telling if you do read that now, because it's my belief, especially with 4th of July coming up, that the Declaration of Independence and the 27 grievances of our founders are actually exactly where we are right now. Again, it's just not a king. It is something else that I call the parent company. But we are in the exact same place as them, and it's time for us to remember that the people that signed the Declaration of Independence all knew that if they lost and they were captured, that they would be tried and hung for treason, their families killed, and their property and land destroyed. And they did it anyway, and they won. So
Yeah.
that's my message to
Well,
people.
and so many people have put themselves on the line, and
Yeah.
many have given their lives for our freedom. Many have risked their lives for our freedom. And today that seems like maybe a foreign concept to maybe our children and their generation, but it really is something that people have fought for 250 years, for the
Oh
freedoms that
yeah.
we enjoy in this country. So you gave us a lot to unpack there, Mel. Let's go back and start picking it apart a little bit. The gentleman that
Okay.
you referenced that was from the former Soviet Union, was he former KGB?
Yeah. Yes.
I know who you're
Yes. And
talking
it's a
about,
great
and
interview.
we
Yeah.
we had Charlie Kirk on the show last week, and he
Oh, great.
referenced that same individual. And if we're talking about the same guy, he predicted wokeism 20 years ago and said that this was
Yes.
going to happen in our country, and it would be intentional to divide our country at the seams and pull us apart. Uh,
Yeah.
that was pretty prophetic. How did he know that?
Well, it's actually right out of the Communist Manifesto, and it's a mixture kind of like a Saul Alinsky tactics, which actually go way back before him, and the Communist Marxist Manifesto, and it's really about subversion and infiltration instead of invasion, as JFK warned us in one of his speeches, that they would infiltrate instead of invade, and that they would come by night instead of with armies by day, and they would intentionally divide us. It's basically the same model that is has been used many times around the world in a color revolution manner, which is basically dividing the people in so many different pieces and parts, oppressed and oppressor, and convincing them that their neighbor is their enemy, to the point that the people can't see anything other than the grievance in front of them, rather than seeing the big picture, which are the people that are in my book I call the dealers, which are the people that are dividing us, so that we don't actually see the real manipulators and the real hands of what are essentially at this point puppet masters that are, in my opinion, running the controlled demolition of America for their own gain. And they unfortunately control much of what's happening in not just America, but the world. And what they've done is they've used Marxism, communism tactics to convince the people that America's not worth it. America's not worth standing for. We're racist. We're sexist. We're misogynistic. We're Islamophobic. We're anti. All these different things are just tactics to divide people so much that there's no unity or cohesion or pride as one people. And once they could do that, which they've been semi-successful, then it's much easier to implement the next phase of the plan.
So, you really have gotten onto a topic that I give a lot of thought to every day. And it seriously feels to me like we are under attack. And it
Mhm.
does feel like a lot of the threats are coming from within, as you alluded to in JFK's admonition. But to me, I look, I try and zoom out and look at the world from outer space. And it seems to me that we are under attack by China, the globalists, and Klaus Schwab, the cartels, the squad, the shadow government. Are they working in concert, or are they all working in silos and having similar effects?
My estimation, after all the work I've done into this, because I do a lot of speeches, who are they? And frankly, the best thing and the easiest way for me to have tried to analyze and kind of articulate what I believe is happening was to follow the money. And when you follow the money, it paints a very disturbing picture of what's happened here in America. Firstly, I think the original coup against the United States started the day they killed JFK in 1963. And from that point on, I believe that our country was captured and that it has been a one cover up after another cover up after another cover up since, basically to hide the original sin. But then from that, there's more and more. There's a situation where I believe at this point, honestly, looking back, that both Bushes, Clinton, Obama, and Biden are all part of this same group that I call the parent company that's running America. And frankly, we have to look at, what is going on in Washington, D.C. and Wall Street and with the military industrial complex to kind of understand what the end game is. In my opinion, I believe that the global public-private partnership that is touted a lot by the World Economic Forum and the UN, they call themselves the stakeholders. That is who is running this, and what people don't really fully grasp at this point, and it's very much like 1984, the description of the state is that who we are fighting right now, unlike World War II, say, is a group of people, mostly globalist aligned billionaire oligarchs from around the world that have no allegiance or alliance to any nation, to any country, to any race, religion. That is not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people that actually consider themselves the stakeholders of the planet, and that it's up to them, unelected, many of them born into enormous wealth. And the truth is that this has been a long game. I frankly believe that this whole model that we're living through, kind of like the Hunger Games, was actually mapped out by Rockefeller when he started the UN and Council of Foreign Relations and Trilateral Commission with the help of Brzezinski and Kissinger. And they planned and plotted, I believe, for with the crown, for a one world, top down, totalitarian, technocratic government. And it has been a long game. They tried after World War I with League of Nations, but that was obviously an actual one world government pitch. United Nations, I believe, is the biggest fraud perpetrated on humanity since it's in existence, and all of its tentacles are involved in what we're dealing with now. And now it looks like they're marching towards World War III to try to get their great reset. And frankly, Obama signed us on to something called Agenda 2030 in 2015 without the consent of the governed, without explaining what it was, and without much fanfare. So nobody looked into it. Well, Agenda 2030, which I have dissected as much as any person could, is 17 sustainable development goals, they call it, but it's sustainable for what I call the global public-private partnership and their partners in the international banking cartel, which I think is the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF, and the World Bank. And frankly, what it appears has happened here is that we were signed on to that. Obama, the Clintons, the Bushes, all these people, doing this in the dark of night, and basically aligned with a bunch of Wall Street people, a bunch of international banking people. They decided that they were ready to take the next step. And Agenda 2030 is 17 development goals to full track and trace surveillance control of a global totalitarian technocracy that would be kind of run out of Brussels and Davos. And at that point, the whole goal now is to get us all onto what they've created called a global digital infrastructure. It's all over the UN. It's all over the World Economic Forum website. The World Health Organization was supposed to be the mechanism to force everyone into accepting this track and trace surveillance, which is essentially a prison of digital AI-based, algorithm-based control over the masses in a major way globally. But the number one thing that Agenda 2030 states is that nation states no longer work, that global problems require global solutions. Therefore, We need global governance, a global government to handle the global problems. So all the way back to the 90s, when Clinton was starting in Rio with Gore and all them, with global warming and global pandemics and global crisis and global wars. It's all been
Global
a slow
pandemics.
kind of like Bezmenov said. It would take about 20 years to really subvert the psyche of the people. And during that time as well, we have had a situation where I believe the 2008 crash was a controlled demolition of the financial markets to centralize power into the small central banks that are aligned with the Bank of International Settlements for the long-term goal of a CBDC that is global. And so all of these different pieces have come together in a very short time called the Great Reset. But the Great Reset is not for the planet. It is certainly not for the people. It is not for prosperity or peace or anything else. The Great Reset is to reset the model that they've been controlling for 100 years for another 100 years. So it all has come to a place where if Hitler and the people that funded Hitler had the technology that we have now, they might have succeeded because he wasn't looking at Germany. He was looking to take over the world. That was a one world government. Well, now they have the technology and they have all of that. And to me, right now, I think the United States is captured, as are many other countries, by a global public-private partnership run by billionaire oligarchs that have a plan for our future global governance, including the total world economy in their hands. And they have captured the three branches of government. I believe the unconstitutional Patriot Act created a unaccountable, illegal, in my opinion, unconstitutional fourth branch of government, the intelligence branch, that has captured the other three. So the other three branches are terrified of the intelligence blob that was, came out of the Patriot Act, but then was weaponized under Holder and Obama by creating a totally unaccountable, with no oversight division of the DOJ, the National Security Division created by Holder, that became a weapon against anyone that challenged the Obama fundamental transformation. And that teamed up with DHS and NSA and DNI, and they went into deals with all of big tech. And frankly, big tech was created by DARPA, In-Q-Tel, and the Department of Defense. All the stories about Facebook and Google, like created in a dorm room at Harvard, are lies. And they were creating the digital public infrastructure. And I believe when Donald Trump came in, he was very aware of Agenda 2030 and the global governance model, and he started to dismantle it. And that is why, I believe the entire Get Trump fraud on the people since 2016 is truly about trillions of dollars in wealth that these people counted on transferring under the guise of Agenda 2030 into their banks in Brussels and Switzerland, and then doling it out in the guise of equity and inclusion and all this BS.
While
from
taking
them.
a healthy
And that's
commission
why
along the way, I
go ahead.
suspect.
That's a
So
lot.
let me ask you, a lot of what you're saying resonates and intuitively sounds believable. Do you have evidence and proof of the things that you're saying? Where
Yes.
where are the facts to support your suspicions?
Well, the great news is that these people are so arrogant that it's on their own websites. So first thing anyone can do is go to weforum.org. That is the World Economic Forum's website, and put in global governance. And you're going to see pages and pages on the World Economic Forum about the coming global governance and the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution is the full track and trace surveillance through Internet of Body, Internet of Things, smart cities, smart homes, and smart cars. So that's the fourth industrial revolution, and AI. Then you're going to also see Agenda 2030, or our common agenda. That is going to be on every website. And people have to know that the World Economic Forum and the UN are one and the same. They are not different. They have not been different. They even have formal agreements. So what people have to do is look it up and go to the websites, because the Bank of International Settlements, IMF and World Bank, NASA, NATO, the Vatican, and all of the UN agencies, including the World Health Organization, IPCC, UNESCO, the Migration Group, and of course the UN and World Economic Forum, all have Agenda 2030 as their main thing. So when you look at them all and you see that they have all the same goals, exactly almost verbatim on all of those different sites, and then you realize that the global public-private partnership that is running the World Economic Forum has their tentacles in every country, then you start to realize, oh, wait, so they're trying to implement this Agenda 2030 in all these countries. The other way to look at it, if you want to understand from what I believe, and also I have a lot of the receipts on the melkshow.com website under resources, totally free. So I go and I get their documents and I download their documents, which are being scraped from the back end of Google, so you can read the PDFs yourself of what they're planning and how they're planning it, all the way back to Kissinger's documents and Mind War documents. So the situation we're in now is that we have a corporation, a company, a financial services company called BlackRock, and as you know, and BlackRock and Vanguard, in my opinion, and probably State Street, but BlackRock in particular is troubling. When I say that there's a parent company running America, I start with, I believe, the most powerful person running what's going on in America in terms of policy and everything else is Larry Fink, because Larry Fink is also on the board of the World Economic Forum. Larry Fink is the creator of the Great Reset and the ESG score model. Larry Fink also is on the board of the Council of Foreign Relations, which is another Rockefeller global government creation with Chatham House. And Larry Fink and BlackRock are apparently the only company, financial services company, that can freely do business in communist China. And they are actively, daily, with American taxpayer pensions that fund them. So if you start there and then you see that Fink is running, basically owns everything in America, BlackRock. Then you go to all the people in the White House that are connected back and forth between BlackRock and the Biden regime, Obama regime. Then you go to the World Economic Forum and Larry Fink's top spot there. And you wonder, how is this possible that US taxpayer pensions in the trillions of dollars are going through a company controlled by a man that is all in at the World Economic Forum with Agenda 2030 global governance, and at the same time investing heavily in Chinese Communist Party military industrial complex, Chinese Communist Party EV manufacturing, this bogus carbon capture thing. So when you look at that, and then you look at the military industrial complex and their investments in that, and the endless war model, it starts to really make a lot of sense. What happened to the United States is basically that a bunch of globalist billionaires decided that the future of finance in the world is not America. The future of finance in the world is the 1.8 billion people in India and the 1.6 billion people in China. And America was basically going to be displaced. And this is openly said. And most people don't realize at the top of the World Economic Forum and at the top of most UN agencies are members of the Communist Chinese Party. And what they often say, if you do go look through their websites and stuff, and just this past week, Davos had their China event. They say basically that the goal in achieving Agenda 2030 is to export the model of efficiency that runs China to the world. Well, Eric Schmidt and Fink and all these people that are now behind the scenes in Biden's White House created the track and trace surveillance model in China with Google China and all the other partners. So what they want now is to expand the Chinese track and trace surveillance social credit model of full control by a public-private partnership above the government, which would be the CCP there. But here, it frankly is this group of people. We know their names. They all show up at the same conferences. Instead of having government meetings, they have conferences. So they go to Bilderberg, they go to Davos, they go to the COP conferences, they go to, any conference having to do with finance. And what's happening is I believe they're running a controlled demolition of America. They're trying to liquidate America, destroy us from within, then put us into, in my opinion, full track and trace surveillance, smart cities on a global public digital infrastructure from birth to death. And frankly, then when that is done, to capture our natural resources, which is why we're not allowed to use any of them right now, and basically turn America into Venezuela. And that is because America no longer is their profit center. And I believe that the Great Reset is about resetting the global economy. It's got nothing to do with anything else. And the people that run the global economy and have since before World War I are not willing to give it up, regardless of how it's imploding. So now they're working in, natural resources and natural asset companies, and we're going to tax carbon. Next, the whole thing with carbon, next it's going to be water, because I watch these people. I know what they're doing. So it's a giant transfer of all wealth on the planet into the hands of the very few that have been controlling it. But now with the central bank digital currency, they feel that they have the model. And frankly, they're isolating the Five Eyes nations, NATO, and the US from the rest of the world financially. And then they will tell us the only way out, I believe, is the central bank digital currency. And if we accept that in America, we are accepting full track and trace surveillance on a massive scale. So I fight against that daily.
Well, keep fighting. I agree with you. And I don't know, are you by any chance a frequent listener to John Gordon's Truth?
No, but now I am.
Well, it's remarkable that we have probably spent more time talking about JFK's assassination, and that being the seminal event of when America lost its innocence. And what I've repeatedly said, and I continue to talk about it, not because of my somewhat unhealthy obsession about who killed Kennedy, because now I think anyone who's bothered to look knows absolutely who killed Kennedy. But it translated for every bureaucrat or power-hungry person with any power in America that you can literally get away with murder if you have the power. And now we have seen the same scenario playing out to lesser degrees until 2020, which I refer to as JFK 2.0, because I totally believe that the shadow government, the alphabet agencies, the permanent Washington elite staged a coup d'etat and stole the election from Donald J. Trump. And the Warren Commission was the official report for the Kennedy assassination. And now we have the J6 Commission as the official Washington report on the stealing of the election from Donald J. Trump. And so the victims are all of a sudden being prosecuted and persecuted, while the people who had the power are being able to not only run roughshod over the people that are the victims, but really the true victims are the American people in the United States Constitution. And I will just finish with this one little note. I also refer to Joe Biden as Biden. So I thought I had coined the phrase.
Well, we're going to have to. We also live near each other, so we got plenty of work to do ahead. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
We've been doing this show for 2 years, and a lot of we have discussed much of what you talk about in smaller bite sizes. Of all the guests that we've had on the show, I would have to say that you have tied the little pieces together into a huge mosaic as effectively as anybody. And quite frankly, I have a very difficult time pushing back or arguing with you, even though I'm prone to arguing about what time the sun comes up. But what you say really does resonate. And I can't pick apart any fact that you have described. And we've had Peter Schweitzer on the show.
Oh, yeah.
Who wrote Red Handed. And Robert Spalding, who has written Stealth Warfare. And then Jonathan, what's Jonathan's name? He's with either Brookings Institute or one of the Washington think tanks, and he's written a book on China as well. But they have got their tentacles into us about as deep and as wide as you can get. And to me, that's scary. And Biden, he isn't worried because I think he's on the take.
Yeah. I mean, they all are. The truth is that, the only way it seems impossible that the woman that wrote the Hunger Games didn't know that this was the goal. But literally, the people that are running, I call the parent company of planet Earth, they literally believe that they are in Pan Am, and that all of us, regardless of what you do or who you are these people that live in wards that they need to control, because of course the fraud that Rockefeller and the Club of Rome created was that basically everything on the planet is the problem of those pesky humans, human caused climate change, human, corruption, this and that. So everything is under the guise of give us all your money, give us all your power, give us everything, and we'll dole it out from here. And we'll also control all the data, because don't forget the data is a huge thing. We'll control everything, and it's completely absurd. And at this point, the good news is that I think that they overplayed their hand during COVID, with the coordination worldwide. That if you did not see that it was a global, orchestrated, lockstep plan that also took you back to the Rockefeller 2010 documents and the creation of the Good Club with Bill Gates and Soros and everyone in 2008 at the Rockefeller Institute and all the different players. It was a long game, but it also goes back to both Brzezinski and Kissinger. Brzezinski with his grand chessboard that's a complete failure at this point, and many other things. And then we have to remember what was the actual what is the deep-seated hatred of Donald Trump really about? And I believe that it is about the parent company that had it all mapped out of how they were going to do the Great Reset, and they were going to use the pandemic, and they were going to get Trump out, and they were going to seize power forever because they have a future plan. And as you notice, Joe Biden is not speaking at all, or whoever's Biden, but his surrogates aren't talking at all about what they're planning to do if they win with the next term. Well, I will tell you, on the White House website, I get everything from their own words, and I put the receipts on my website for free on the resource page. On the White House website from September of 2023, there is a document, Biden-Harris commitments to global goals. The first sentence says Barack Obama signed on to Agenda 2030 in 2015. Biden-Harris will achieve Agenda 2030 on time and lead the world to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. In that document, still living on the White House website, it lists all 17 sustainable goals and about $3 trillion of U.S. taxpayer money going all into global institutions, mainly the World Bank, and then being divvied out to global organizations that are connected to the UN. And as I said, the hard part with this entire scenario is that this group of people, they govern by conference and by private secret meetings and like Bilderberg type meetings and stuff. So they are never really seen, but they are pushing policy from above on the countries that they've captured. And there's actually, for people that want to get an even closer look, why I think Larry Fink and BlackRock are the ones running the controlled demolition of America. And frankly, the parent company that's controlling our country with a bunch of other billionaires, obviously Soros and Gates and the rest of those guys, Reid Hoffman, all the people that are also connected to the World Economic Forum, not shockingly from our nation. But 6 months before COVID, now Donald Trump started to dismantle Agenda 2030. He's never really articulated it as I would like him to, but he pulled us out of NAFTA, the fraudulent Paris Climate Accords, UNESCO, the World Health Organization, the Migrant Pact. This was intentionally dismantling the global governance model that they had been putting out there since Nancy Pelosi announced Agenda 21 back in the 90s. So Trump's saying, and he's going on the floor of the UN, he's going on to Davos, he's saying, we will never be a globalist nation. We are a sovereign country. We will always be a sovereign country. We are the United States of America. He was reiterating that they were not going to achieve Agenda 2030 and over. So I think the true get Trump hatred that manifested in, 8 years of abuse of the American people with hoax and manipulation is all about the globalist billionaire oligarchs that are running this global governance game, losing power because Trump was dismantling it in real time, and they had to get rid of him. So if you look at a conversation, so Larry Fink invited 6 months before COVID, all of the globalist bankers, the central bankers, and most of the board members of all the companies. So he also controls BlackRock, the boards of almost every company on the S&P 500. So he invited them all to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I call it the going direct speech. And he says basically, the governments are failing to achieve Agenda 2030, the Great Reset. Okay, so he's saying we're going to have to go direct. And if people go and look at Larry Fink's Go Direct speech from Jackson Hole in 2020, they're going to see what he's saying. What he is saying in that speech is that the corporations and the banking institutions will have to skip the governments and go directly to the people to manipulate their behavior to make sure that they get back on track to and towards the goals of Agenda 2030 and the Great Reset. And that is exactly what I believe happened during COVID. And what happened was, not only do I believe that the intelligence community blob that was created out of the unconstitutional Patriot Act works for the parent company, but I also believe that the lawfare crew out of Brookings, Eisen, Weissman, McCord, all of them that have been after Trump, and all the lawyers and all the lawfare from the beginning of Trump's term, all the Crossfire Hurricane, they all blend in if you look at the names. Crossfire Hurricane, the fake Mueller report to investigate the fake Crossfire Hurricane, both fake impeachments, the Transition Integrity Project, which is part of what I'm talking about, and all of the Trump lawfare comes out of Brookings and all of the same players that were behind the scenes during Obama that weaponized the intelligence community in the National Security Division, Weissman, Eisen, McCord, and frankly, still to this day, they are running the lawfare. So to me, I call it the Poison Ivy League lawfare team. The lawfare team and the intelligence community work for the parent company, and underneath them are three branches of government, and underneath them are us. And frankly, if the government is captured on a local and national level, we don't have a vote or a say. And that's why there's many solutions. And the biggest solution is, in my opinion, the DC vassal state is too corrupt to the core. There's too much blackmail, bribery, insider trading, and criminality. So frankly, I think that, the first step here is to remove the money from Washington, D.C., starting with making lobbying totally and completely illegal, ending funding of NGOs by 1 cent of taxpayer dollar and no tax exemption, because they're all funded by the globalist billionaires destroying America. And from there, I frankly think that every senator and congressperson should have to live where their constituents are 90% of the time and only go to DC when necessary, as they proved they could during COVID, and start there. And if we started there, and then I think Citizens United should be reversed and we brought power back to the people, because those things I just listed ended the voice and the vote of all people in America, not just left or right, but all of us. Because I believe that the entire capture of the election system is set up in a way by all these same people to not have anyone vote at all, to not have any votes count. It's not about stealing the election. It's about making the illusion to the people that we actually have a vote, when essentially the parent company is choosing everyone and allowing us to pour our money into candidates when, guess what? They don't need our money. They got it from lobbyists. They got it from the corporations. They got it from foreign investors we don't know about. And they're sucking up our money. So to me, the left and right Republican and Democrat parties as well are completely infiltrated by they're just billion-dollar conglomerates that keep us fighting and giving them money when nothing changes, because the parent company runs them too. So Mel, as much as it sounds overwhelming, I do on my website, in a section that I map it out, I believe we're talking about 20,000 people maybe that actually understand what's going on and are orchestrating it in a country of 350 million people. And right, so to me, that's why I say we can restore power one person at a time. If every person says, you know what, I'm going to be in one of those 350 million people fighting against dismantling this 20,000 people that, like you said, have been either in power or had power bred or groomed into power since the murder of JFK.
All right, let me just ask you to give me some short answers in the short amount of time that we've got remaining. I love what you've talked about. I'm not being disparaging at all, but I just don't want to run out of time without beginning to ask you. Are you inferring, or maybe you were saying explicitly, that you think COVID was an intentional act?
Yeah, I believe that.
That's really some scary stuff, don't you think? I mean, to me, that deprives anyone of the right to govern or have any level of influence if their level of ethical behavior could be that devoid of compassion for humanity.
I agree. But shouldn't the first question being asked,
and 2 more who I
just want to say, shouldn't the first question about COVID being asked, and this is why I get upset, that nobody's asking it. Why, if China is our biggest enemy, was the NIH and Department of Defense giving millions of dollars to work at a Wuhan lab to create bioweapons against the United States or anywhere else? It should be treason off the top. So it starts there, and then you work your way down.
Well, my biggest, I guess, clue that it was intentional was that I've become aware of from reading that the vaccine was actually started in 2015 and that Moderna had a United States government contract to start to develop a vaccine for the COVID virus. Now, I just don't, and then when you watch the way that the federal government, which moves at a glacier's pace most of the time, responded to the crisis, and the way that the communications all seem to be so well thought out and delivered, it just seems to me that there's no way it could have been spur of the moment sort of reactionary sort of behavior. My suspicions, without direct evidence, is that the COVID crisis was intentional and it was unleashed on us.
Yeah, I agree with that. And like I'm saying, it's not because of what Trump was doing in America. It was because of what Trump was doing to the international banking community and the agenda that they had been working on for decades and dismantling it. George Soros was the first, after he won, that came out and said, I'm going to have Trump removed. And the whole thing started. And it wasn't about, like Donald Trump says, they're not after me, they're after you, and I'm in the way. I agree with that on a psychological and demoralization level. But the real truth is they're not after America, they're after the world, and America is in the way because of our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our inherent founding of being against bullies and tyrants. And if they cannot get America gaslit to the point that we accept the global public infrastructure, then they fail. Then they can't have it. And that is why I feel like American people have to understand how important they are in this role. Because right now, fighting this creeping totalitarian tyranny that we're seeing is not about just America. If America falls to the global 17 development goals to full track and trace surveillance, the whole world will. But without America, it can't work. So, I mean, that's why I say the election of 2024 has nothing to do with Trump or Biden. It literally, from Biden's own words on the website where he announces global goals, and as you notice, and you'll notice more, they're not talking about what he's going to be doing if he wins in 25. I'm telling you that they are going to be achieving Agenda 2030. So it says it right there. But to me, the 2024 election has nothing to do with Biden or Trump. It has to do with, do you want to remain the country that our founders created and have the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the rule of law, prosperity, a constant state of making a more perfect union, united with our sovereignty and our borders intact? Or do you want to become a globalist cog in a wheel in a Hunger Games world that's controlled by AI and algorithms out of Brussels or Switzerland or wherever they decide to headquarters the whole thing, maybe Ukraine? So,
well, let's talk about Ukraine for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
And
Sure.
before I do that, I want to ask you, I heard you say that the Mueller investigation was a phony investigation. Tell us what you mean by that, because it basically cleared Donald Trump of any collusion with Russia. And I don't think that it was the result that the Democrats were expecting or at least hoped for. What do you think? Where are you coming from?
What I think is that before Crossfire Hurricane was launched, John Brennan and Peter Strzok and a whole bunch of people picked 26 people, including Donald Trump, to that were traveling around the world, as it's called, to bump them, to create an illusion that Trump and the people on this list, including Dr. Carson and George Papadopoulos and all the people, Carter Page, that they created the illusion all over the world using the Five Eyes nations that these people had relationships with Russians and Australians and people in the UK. I think the UK kind of ran the pre-Crossfire Hurricane operation with Gina Haspel and Brennan, Gina Haspel being in the UK at the time, and they set up the precedent for Crossfire Hurricane, a total fraud. Then Brennan and the entire Obama team went forward with the fraud that Russia hacked the servers of the DNC when everyone knows it was Seth Rich, and then he was murdered And then that's never been solved somehow in DC, but they can find January 6th protesters that stood outside, in Peoria. And then going on from there, they created the illusion to stop Trump and to get in the way and to put up roadblocks and not allow him to get things done. They put a lot of snakes around him. McConnell and I think Pence were involved in that, and Pompeo. And it was really to stop Trump from giving the country back to the people as the Constitution intended. And as it went on, Crossfire Hurricane and Crossfire Razor against General Flynn were completely and totally manufactured and fabricated by all of the names we know, including Norm Eisen and Weissman and McCord and Monaco and Yates and Power and Obama and Comey and Brennan and Rod Rosenstein.
You
So
know this
the whole
stuff.
premise,
So
well,
tell me,
yeah,
General Flynn, good guy or
yeah,
bad guy? One of
I
us
love
or one
General
of them?
Flynn.
I'm sorry?
He's a friend of mine personally, so I'm a fan of General Flynn.
Well, we had him on the show a couple of months ago, right when he launched his new movie, and
Uh,
I called him a mixed bag, to which he took great offense, and I did not mean it disparagingly. But he was a Democrat. He gave the keynote address at the Republican National Convention as a Democrat. Then all of a sudden, he's the President Trump's national security advisor for about a week, and less than a month, 3 weeks, I think, to be exact. And then he is out because he had a meeting with a Soviet diplomat. And I thought that's what his job was, for crying out loud. Aren't we supposed to be in Washington building relationships? And isn't that why we have all those embassies up there? So we establish relationships with them so that if things do ever head into the toilet, we have a phone number we can pick up and a voice that we know and a relationship that we've established. None of that ever made sense to me, and it still doesn't. I was asking General Flynn to please help me understand it, and he couldn't get past the mixed bag thing,
it's
allowing us to have
okay.
a real
I can tell
conversation.
you what I believe, because I did work on that too, and I deal with a lot of this. I really, really have dissected Crossfire Hurricane and also the Mueller team and all of that. I Most people don't know that Donald Trump was going to have General Flynn do an audit of the Pentagon and the CIA and all of the black ops, because General Flynn, don't forget why Obama hated him and disparaged him and told Donald Trump not to hire him, was because General Flynn said that the war in Afghanistan was not meant to be won, and that if we wanted to, that basically he started saying these wars are not being fought for the reasons that the American people are being told, and he wanted to know where the black ops lived, where the money was going, what is what is going on, that the Pentagon over and over can't account for billions and trillions sometimes of dollars going back to 9/11. And they wanted to audit the Pentagon, and General Flynn was had just announced internally that he was going to do that. And within days, Mike Pence and Reince Priebus called General Flynn, who's meeting with the Japanese, and tell him to come back to DC because Pence says he lied to him. And from then on, Donald Trump to this day now says he was wrong to do it. But it was early on. And just like Comey said, when Trump was early in office, they could get away with a lot because he was an outsider. And that's what they did. But the truth is that they were going to audit the Pentagon. And I believe that he will do it when he comes back in. It needs to be done. We need to
Absolutely.
know
There
where
are hundreds of
USAID
millions of
money is
dollars.
going and all of that.
There are hundreds
But
of millions of dollars that are unaccounted for on the Department of Defense budget. Where is the money? Who got it? I'm sorry. You can't hide that much money. Somebody knows where it went, and we deserve to know. But more importantly than that, we need to know who is working against us inside our own federal government. And one of
absolutely.
the things that disturbs me is that I've read that 95% of the permanent Washington bureaucrats donate to Democratic candidates. And so we
Yeah,
know that it skews very much to the left. And I don't think that they are there to work for us as they are supposed to. But what you said about General Flynn reminded me of when Jimmy Carter called Burt Lance to Washington, and he was going to reorganize the federal government as he had done state government in Georgia, and he called on Burt Lance to do it. Well, Burt Lance lasted about a month before they
right.
undid him. and sent him packing back to
Sure.
Georgia. So,
Yeah.
is Donald Trump capable of standing up to all of these evil forces? I do think that he went to Washington very naive, as would
Me
anyone
too.
who had lacked the
Yeah.
experience. Now he's going to be a much wiser, better informed president. And I think he's also going to go up there genuinely pissed off, deservedly. I don't think that he's going to be motivated by vengeance, but I think that it's going to fuel his passion to get this government cleansed, which is what we've been calling for on The Truth for 2 years. I've said repeatedly, we need a cleansing in America, and all the secrets need to come out. We need
I
to
agree.
know who killed JFK, who killed RFK, who killed Martin Luther King. We need to know where all the money that has gone to the Ukraine, where has it actually ended up? And that's the point I wanted to kind of wrap up with, Mel. You know, unlike you, I don't have the time to really dig in to the depth and extent that you have. Although I'm getting free, so will have more time to do that. Your level of knowledge and your knowledge base is nothing less than remarkable, and I really appreciate you sharing it with us. But I'm wondering, I'm watching what is happening in the Ukraine. And this has been a topic that we've covered over the last month here on The Truth. And you just watch and listen. And Joe O. Biden went on ABC News with David Muir and said that he wasn't going to bomb Moscow and the internal areas of Russia. He was only going to selectively bomb or allow American made munitions to be used to bomb just inside the Russian border. Well, that's like Putin going on TV and saying that he isn't going to bomb Washington and Memphis, that he's just going to bomb Miami, West Palm Beach, and New
Right.
York. And
Yeah.
it is the most insane, reckless statement of any sitting president that I have ever heard. And so, what did we get? We get 4 Russian warships traveling just outside the domestic waters of West Palm Beach that 2 of my friends reported having seen, making their way to Cuba to join
Yep.
up with a nuclear submarine. And we don't know whether it has nuclear arms or not, but we suspect that it probably does. Is Biden going to get us into a world war between now and November so that they can suspend the elections and he can remain in power? Because I don't see any other way that he's going to be president in after January the 20th, 2025.
Sadly, I believe that listening to these people, which is really hard to do, I frankly believe not only is NATO not a defensive operation, I believe NATO is their military, the people I'm talking about, the parent company. And I believe that they would prefer a nuclear escalation than to ever give up power. Whatever the case may be, there have been multiple times of trying to negotiate peace. I also think a lot of people don't realize not just the history that in 2014 Obama and his cronies and Newland and everyone overthrew the government of Ukraine and put 12, different clandestine stations in there and everything. But George Soros said that he was the most powerful person in Ukraine back in 2014. And then, at the time, the Washington Post, Guardian, all the intel newspapers were telling us that Ukraine was the most corrupt country in the world. Well, next thing you know, Zelensky's at Davos, and he's telling all the World Economic Forum folks, the Great Reset, Agenda 2030 folks, use Ukraine. Come to Ukraine. Use Ukraine. So, Sam Bankman-Fried was all involved in Ukraine, and the track and trace surveillance was all in being built in Ukraine, and all kinds of infrastructure. And at this point, I believe that the globalist BlackRock and others own almost all of Ukraine's farmland. And if you watch what's happening there, also China has announced that China, BlackRock, and JP Morgan, the central bank, will be rebuilding Ukraine to the tune of $600 billion. So it's a similar thing's going to happen with the fraud that was the Marshall Plan. Give us all this money and we're going to do this. Well, they built the EU. So, what they're doing in Ukraine, I believe, is creating the base for NATO, if it survives, to be that world military that even Trump mentioned. Like these people, they have their own military, they have their own this and that. There's this globalist elite. But at the same time, I honestly do not believe that Xi or Putin are going to take the bait. I think they want there to be an incident. But if I see an incident, just like the Nord Stream, just like, sending bombs in that landed on a beach in Russian territory where civilians were, just like the terrorist attack not too long ago in Moscow. What I really believe is that this globalist oligarchy billionaire club, they'd rather burn the world down than give up power. And I think they'll fail. I feel very confident that they've never been closer to their one world government plans. They've also never been so far because they tried desperately to control the narrative with censorship, with all this stuff they've done, cancellations, all the blocking of people. But you know what? Too many people know, and frankly, America's behind the eight ball when it comes to the rest of the world because most of Europe and most of the other countries are very aware that their countries are being destroyed with this agenda in order for their sovereignty to be taken. That's why we see farmers all over the world. That's why we're seeing huge hundreds of thousands of people rally in the streets all over the world. And yet I think January 6th really dampened the spirit because I believe if January 6th didn't happen, we'd have hundreds of thousands of people in DC demanding that they have peace in Ukraine and stop escalating the wars in both Ukraine and Israel. Because frankly, I believe both of those wars are being funded on both sides by those people that are trying to consolidate power into their hands. And I think they have a mission. It's order out of chaos, create the problems, then pretend that you're the solution and convince the people after you've, death by 1,000 cuts. America's sitting there, all chaotic and all of this. And they come in and they say, we have the solution, and that's where I think we are right now. I do not think that, honestly, if something escalates to the next level, I believe it's NATO doing it. I think NATO should be dismantled. And frankly, we need to go through all of our agreements with nations. And I believe Trump's the only person at this point. It appears that Xi, Putin, Modi, Saudi Arabia, North Korea, they're done with Biden and the Biden administration. They want nothing to do with Sullivan or Austin or the worst guy, Blinken, or any of them. But I do believe all of these people will sit down with Donald Trump. So to me, Trump, whether you like him or hate him, he's sand in the gears of the global governance movement. And in those 4 years, we can do a lot of more damage to dismantle it. And then the Chevron decision, the SEC decision, the EPA decision, we can dismantle the administrative state pretty easily with the 10th Amendment, sending things back to the states. So I feel like if Trump comes in, it's not about Trump. It is about the American people realizing that we got here because of us. Because we weren't engaged locally and statewise and county. We weren't engaged. We were eyes off the ball, distracted largely by design. But going forward in 2025, it actually has to be a new model where we redefine as citizens our relationship with the government rather than ignore them and let the government do whatever they want until we're again facing totalitarianism with a technology AI element. We have to realize 2025 is the beginning of
All
a
right, Mel,
new
three minutes, two thoughts. They have been so hypercritical of Trump and his having established a relationship with Putin, much like JFK established a relationship with Khrushchev. Trump also went to North Korea, where he established a relationship with Kim Jong-un. The first person he entertained after becoming the president-elect was to have Chairman Xi come to Mar-a-Lago. People were hypercritical of the outreach that he made to Putin. I viewed it as keep your friends closer and close and your enemies closer. I think he wanted to establish relationships with these world leaders. And, politics makes for strange bedfellows, as we've heard all of our lives. I have a suspicion that Putin actually may be in the crosshairs of the globalists that you're talking about, because I read an article not too long ago where he pretty much drew a red line in the sand and was speaking to Klaus Schwab and the globalists and said that Russia's going to have no part of it. He may end up
Well,
being our ally before it's over.
I think they want their natural resources because if you look at it, that it's a parent company running the world that wants to consolidate power, including all natural resources in their own hands, all the money supply in their own hands to control. Russia has the most natural resources. So, they're talking about breaking up Russia. You know what? You know what Putin cares about? Russia. You know what I
Absolutely.
want my president to care about? America.
That's
And,
right.
and frankly, we got a deal on the world stage, but we need a new model. And I don't know what to do about the UN, but it is completely corrupt to the core. And all of its tentacles, all of its agencies are giant transfers of wealth that go into a black hole. We give billions of dollars to these agencies that are connected to the UN. And in 75 years, have they developed any of the developing countries? Has the world become more peaceful? Anything that the UN promised, we've had the opposite. So there's a lot we can do, but it's going to take somebody. And I think I honestly believe, we're talking about 4 years for Trump. So I'm most concerned with who he's going to pick as AG, because like you said earlier, and we can talk about it next time, the Mueller report was a cover up of the Crossfire Hurricane, in my opinion. But again, we need an AG this time that's going to go all the way back to 2016 because it's the same criminals in the Obama regime
I
that
totally
need to be
agree,
held
and I think
accountable.
that they have paved the way for us to hold them
I
accountable
agree.
because they have said
Exactly.
no one is above the law, and us Republicans, conservatives, we're kind of hands off. We're kind of gentlemen. Okay, well, you did it, but now we're in power, so we're going to look the other way. I don't think that's going to happen this time. It
No
is
way.
really time for accountability. Last question. Will we get a free and honest election in 2024? Or is there going to be an October surprise? And if so, what do you suppose that might be?
Well, listen, we're in unprecedented times. I think we have desperate caged animals, mainly because their financial plans to maintain power over the world financial system is falling apart more than anything else. And so anything could happen. But what I do believe is that there will be a lot of chaos and conflict between now and then. But in the end, I think a lot of people that 30% of Americans don't participate in voting. I would bet that about 10%, if not more, will this time. And they can't even imagine that. And then I believe that we'll get about 15% of people that voted for Biden last time. And I think it'll be impossible to convince the public that it wasn't stolen if they steal
Well,
it.
I'm going
So
to say a
if they
prayer
steal it,
and
they have
hope
to
that you are
steal it in real
right.
time.
I don't, and I've have just thoroughly enjoyed our time today, and I'm going to call John Fredericks and say I need more than an hour on Saturdays. We're going to go 7 days,
Cool.
10 hours a day, and we're going to solve all these problems. Mel K, where do people
Anytime.
find you, and where do they buy your book?
Okay, it's the melkshow.com. And if you want receipts on some of the things I'm talking about and to dig in yourself and learn some of this, I have a free resource page on the melkshow.com. Start there and become your own expert. I say we need Paul Revere's in every neighborhood right now to tell people what the stakes really are. And the book can be found pre-order on Amazon. It's Americans Anonymous, Returning Power to the People, One Citizen at a Time.
Mel K, it has been a privilege and a pleasure to have you on The
Thank you,
Truth
sir.
today, and we have told you the truth. I'm John Gordon. We'll see you again next Saturday.